Today we had the boys here. Our summer leadership academy is going now, and we do from 9 to 2. So we're just over here at the Ocala golf course here, and the boys were out there swinging and golfing. And one of the boys said, I just heard him from the background said, I think this may be my new sport. But just that's right. Exposure. Like you just don't know what you know, and that's the power of it, man.
I heard a saying, and it's kind of similar. Life is like a book, and if you never travel, you've never turned the page. And it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And for someone who hates traveling, and I really hate traveling, people make me go travel with them, and then I really enjoy it. I'm exposed to things that I otherwise wouldn't have seen.
Welcome world, welcome family to another episode of the EL2A Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Gilmore Jr. And to the right of me, I don't have Mr. The Rocket. He's not here today. We have a special guest today. We have Mr. Bill Gladson, state attorney from the 5th Judicial Circuit. How you doing today, Bill?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you for being here. So one beautiful thing about this platform that we created, we allow folks like yourself to come up here and just share your story. A lot of people see the title, state attorney, you know what I mean? And they just see you as the big bad wolf. And one thing about this, I want to, we're going to humanize you for a bit. We're going to get into what you do as well, but We're going to humanize you first before we get there. But as you know, stop what you're doing right now. Like, subscribe, and comment. All right. These episodes cannot keep going unless you like, subscribe, and comment. All right. So that's gets it going. I know Bill's probably, his family's probably watching. All right. So making sure you guys give us a little subscribe. Just because he's here, you're going to watch, but you can watch the next episode and the next one as well. But to get into you, Bill, I really want to, I wrote this down because as I was reading it, it was eye-opening to me. So I'm gonna start off kind of selfishly.
Okay.
240 employees, 5 counties, 1.3 million people. That's a lot of stuff going on. For me, we have a team like 5. We see about 130 kids, and that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot for me to deal with. So I can only imagine what you got. So the question I had for you, where does Bill Gladson find peace?
That's an interesting question. So I have 2 children. One lives in Chicago and one lives in Gainesville. And having watched my son now recently graduating from school and starting his career has been, it's been a journey. And honestly, it's occupied a lot of my energy when I'm not working. I'm thinking about, how's he going to do? How is he doing? What's life going to be like without him in the household? And it has been, and my daughter's still in Gainesville. She comes down a lot, but it has been a interesting time because when the kids were still in the house, there was work and then there was home with the kids. And now that they're grown up, it's hard to admit that it's me and my wife, and that I've got to find things to do and occupy my time. But, I've got a lot of friends that I've got, fortunately or unfortunately, the work that I do, it doesn't end at 5. I get in trouble at home for being on the phone, not just from my wife, but from my kids, and not just at 6 o'clock, but at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. And I've tried to be good about distancing work from, but the reality is that it's not possible. And I try to explain that to people like my family, and it's hard for them to understand because my wife, when she stops working, that's the end of the day, it's over. And I envy that because it's not that way for my personality and also for what I do.
Yeah. So you say it's not that way for your personality and what you do. So the person you are wouldn't even, if the job said you could put it down, you're saying the person you are wouldn't allow you to?
I'd have to do something. I think I'd like the idea of, if I wasn't doing this, teaching and getting back to kind of educating people about what we do, but from a different perspective, whether it's teaching at a college or a police academy or something like that someday. But a lot of people in my office over the years have taught while they're prosecuting. So they'd have a job on the side, both for the extra money, but also to help kind of shape the future of the criminal justice system in our little world.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a great question. It's a tough question, frankly. What would I do without it, or what would I do when I have spare time? I mean, frankly, the day-to-day is me working around the house. I feel like I've been fixing sprinklers since I was like 8 years old.
Yeah.
I'm so tired of sprinklers. So that's my life.
The sprinkler man.
Yeah, just digging. Yeah, it's not good.
All right. So take me back. Talking about what you do now, obviously taking a career in criminal justice. When you go back to young Bill, the kid that was where'd you grow up in?
So I grew up in Miami.
So growing up in Miami, what did young Bill, what did he want to be?
So my father was an attorney and his father was an attorney. I actually did not want to do that. I thought I wanted to do something else. And pretty early on in high school, I was started to become interested in law enforcement. I think I was interested in the idea of what I thought law enforcement was, the excitement, all that you might see when you're 15 or 16 years old. And I got a little taste of it kind of volunteering with the Coral Gables Police Department for a couple years and through their Explorer program. And I enjoyed it. And that really kind of lit a little bit of a fire. But then I went off to college. And when I was in Gainesville so I graduated high school in 89. So in 1990, August of 1990, the Gainesville murders happened.
Wow.
And I think at that time, I had probably put going into law enforcement a little bit out of my mind. That happened, and the University of Florida, all of Gainesville changed when that happened.
Yeah.
And there became an opportunity for me to go to the police academy up in Gainesville. I was 19 years old. And I begged my parents to let me take one semester off of school to go to the academy. And I pitched it to them. I was like, well, if I go and I finish, I'll go right back. And then I'll also make $9.52 an hour, which is what I did. So I worked and made $10 an hour, working all the football games and working in doing security and all that stuff around campus for the next year and a half. And then, I enjoyed that. That kind of got the taste. But then I realized that I wanted to do more than just that. Not that there's anything wrong with just doing that, but I started to shift back towards being an attorney. So when I graduated from undergraduate, I had applied to law school, and I found myself to me, it's kind of interesting how things shape out. I wanted to do law enforcement. I wanted to be a lawyer. I have now found for me the job where I kind of have my foot in both sides of that. And I like that.
Yeah, I like that. So one thing you caught my eye or my ear once you first said, you said you got into it for what you thought law enforcement was. And I thought I forget what you said it was, but thinking about that, why you got into it. So what is law enforcement to you? You get what I'm saying? So the comparison of what you thought it was and what is it?
Yeah, that's a good point. So I thought it was lights, sirens, chasing people, car chases, and it's a lot more of sitting and being prepared, but waiting for the emergency. It's not, when you watch, I go back to Cops, that show in the 80s, 90s, and probably still on. If you think that's what law enforcement is, probably where I got my idea. Well, there's always something fun going on, but there's times when you're sitting at the jail for 3 hours, just sitting there waiting for something, or so. The reality is there are long stretches, depending on what you do, of course, long stretches of contemplation, and then punctuated by these bursts of something happened, and then you're excited and you got to deal with it. Yeah. And that's great. That adrenaline is really incredible. That's what's that. And the reality of when you're in that job, and I did it for part-time. I probably over 20 years. I was sworn here, Gainesville, Eustis, FWC. Yeah. So I did it for a long time. And, I enjoy it. So I found the right job, I think, for me.
Yeah. One thing I found, you kind of talk about, I think you said your dad and someone else was in law enforcement.
An attorney.
Attorney. Yeah. Okay. So when myself, I am who I am today because of my foundation, you know what I mean, from the household I come from. Most of the time, I believe that when you look at a successful person, you can look back and see somewhere there was somebody that helped them. I want to go back to your foundation. How was, did you grow up in a 2-parent home? Or how was your foundation growing up?
I did. I grew up in a large Catholic family. I was the youngest of 6 kids in a neighborhood where I could walk to school. And the structure of it, the foundation of it was there. Having 5 brothers and sisters, by the time I was old enough, actually my oldest sister is probably 16 years older than me. So I'm starting to grow up and she's already leaving for college.
Yeah.
So there was a big family, but they also I was 8 years after the last child.
Mm-hmm.
They had 5. 8 years had gone by, and then I come along. So the family had an entire life before I got there. So I'm growing up now with a lot of older brothers and sisters that are away and still played an important role. But, you know, my dad worked all day, didn't make much money. He would work till he would come home, and this is pre-cell phone, of course, but he would work till 10, 11 o'clock at night. And my mom also worked at the school where I was going, and then they both needed to work to pay the bills. I mean, I didn't have it tough, but it wasn't like, you know, someone could just take time off either. Mm-hmm. So I saw their work ethic. And I think that helped kind of shape. It also initially made me not want to be a lawyer, to be honest with you. I was like, I don't want to do that, because he would come home, he would dictate on the old dictaphone, all kinds of letters, and he would do that till 10, 11 o'clock at night, and then go back to work first thing in the morning. And you know, that takes a toll on you.
Yeah. Mentorship, obviously what we do at Cut Different, mentorship is key, what we say. Again, I think mentorship is your life experience, you pulling another person up. If I made a mistake, I feel I should come in another young person's life and help them not make the same mistake that I did, give them guidance. For me, in my personal life, mentorship played a huge role, from having a youth coach to going to college, having college coaches, grad school. All along the way, I had a mentorship. What role has mentorship played in you, helping you get to where you are today?
So having people that you aspire to be like is, I think, critical, especially if you really understand who they are and what they do. And to me, in high school in particular, I had some really good teachers that challenged me. Mm-hmm. Having somebody challenge you and not just tell you how to think, but forcing you to think, is a really good way of learning. It's a good way of learning, and it's a good way of learning who you really are. And I think the mentors that I had were some teachers. I can think of 2 of them in high school that really made a difference. My grade school was nuns and a Catholic church with nuns. There was no back and forth. It was just, it was a completely different top down, you know, hierarchy there. But in high school, it was a lot more challenging, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah. So let's get into it a little bit. So what does justice mean to you?
So I had a law professor who would say, little variation on the question. He says, what is due process? Mm-hmm. And his answer was fairness and justice. Mm-hmm. And then we would talk in law school. It's the Socratic method. So there were no answers given. It was just, like you said, you ask a question and then we talk about what the answer is. Mm-hmm. For me, justice is broader than, it's a very broad category, because, and I had explained this to a reporter one time, a victim might not like the result of a decision that we make, or a jury might make a decision contrary to what we think the evidence showed, right? To the victim, they didn't get justice. Maybe I didn't file the charges, or maybe they got a not guilty.
Yeah.
But bigger than that is, justice means that everybody played by the rules. So we had a fair playing field. This person had a lawyer, there was a judge, there were rules of evidence, and we followed the law. And the result we came to, whether you like it or not, I would consider a just result. That would be my perspective. Yeah. But I totally understand from a victim's perspective. Yeah, it's going to be different, right?
It's going to be different. And I was going to even, when I hear fair, so you said fairness and justice. Can you calculate fairness? Like what is fair?
I don't think you can. I think it depends on what context. Mm-hmm. Nobody has had the exact same upbringing and opportunities as anybody else. Right. I mean, there's no 2 people that have had the exact same. I mean, you could have looked at my family and thought everything was perfect, and everything's great and everything's fine and they've got everything, and that just wouldn't be the case. So the outward appearances are going to be different, and those things, those journeys, like I was very sick as a child for several years. I was only recently thinking about that. I had put that out of my mind. I'd put that on my mind for probably 30 or 40 years, but it came up and I was thinking about it. And my sister, one of my sisters, was one of the ones who was answering questions because I said, "What did you guys know about what was going on with me?" And I was in college. I didn't know this. I didn't know that. And then they were telling me how much they thought that shaped my personality, but I never had that conversation with them. And it's interesting when you look back about the major things that might have happened in your life and how they created your trajectory.
Yeah, and obviously the tough decisions and things that you have to make. When we're thinking, because I'm hearing this, and what the first thing that comes to my mind are those things taken into consideration. I guess when there's a case, and
so there's lots of good question. There are lots of ways that you can use your life experience to inform make better decisions.
Right.
I think having the ability to look at something from someone else's perspective is critical. In the end, though, our job is to follow the law. We have a ton of discretion, and we should. And it's right that we have discretion because we get to be held accountable by the voters if we abuse our discretion.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you can't look at things completely and totally in a vacuum. You have to take into consideration that maybe this happened because of this other thing. And this other thing would have, had that not happened, this person shouldn't be necessarily judged solely based on what he or she might have done. Right. That's not an excuse, it's an explanation. And the reason I say that is there still can be accountability without necessarily a prosecution. And I'll give you an example.
Please.
You get caught having marijuana and you're 19 years old, which marijuana is not legal yet, but it certainly seems like it. You get caught with marijuana and you either get a citation or you get arrested, but you've never done anything wrong. And you don't want that to affect, a job that you might get or a school that you get into or anything like that. That is something where I can look at it and say, I don't have to, but I'm going to offer you diversion. I'm going to put you in a program where you just take a class, pay a fine, and, learn that, hey, this is a free shot at this minor offense. You only are allowed one of those. Yeah. So get somebody's attention, hold them accountable, but not change the trajectory of their life. And diversion opportunities we have a lot of them. We have a lot of programs, particularly for juveniles, but for everybody, and even into some felonies. It's where people who have, you often see it where someone who's 65 years old shoplifts from Walmart. Yeah. No criminal history. I mean, is the right thing to do to put that person in prison or jail? No. It's just, it's not going to be. So there needs to be a way to evaluate not just what the person did, but to some extent, the individualities of that person. And that's where the defense lawyers come in. Yeah. They make those cases.
For sure. Something you just said, prevention, it comes to mind. So one thing we're big, what we do is in space prevention. We want to get into a young person's life before a problem occurs. When you think about, I think about Chief Balkin when we're having this conversation. I have many conversations with him when he thinks that our juveniles are not getting, I guess the word is, they're basically getting let loose. You know what I mean? They do something and they're not held accountable for what they're doing. How do you see when it comes to things with cases and things with juveniles?
So I would agree generally with that assessment. There are the model for juvenile criminal justice is geared towards rehabilitation.
Right.
That's what it is. It's supposed to be rehabilitation. That's why it's confidential. That's why it doesn't stay on your adult record. And for minor offenses, that's appropriate. I think where the juvenile legal world has a real problem is that as children or young people escalate, it doesn't respond appropriately. And then all of a sudden a kid can be doing bad things as a juvenile and not really understand that there's going to be consequences on the 365th day the first day you turn 18. Yeah. What you did now means a 20-year prison minimum mandatory. Yeah. So I think we fail as a criminal justice system, as a society, as individuals. We fail to catch people's attention before they make the really bad decisions. And I suspect that might be what he's talking about.
For sure. And as you're going through there, what are some common trends or threads that are you seeing from the young people that are showing up or when you're looking over these things?
It's oddly enough, but we see a fairly good amount of school threats. And you'd think with all of the talk and all of the tragedy that's happened across this country that even kids who are really young and immature would know that you can't just, bring a gun to school or threaten something and they still do it. And then it's like, okay, so I have a kid who has all these issues, but if I don't take it seriously, and of course I would, but if I didn't come down the way that I think I should, I don't want to reinforce someone who went from 0 to that, that to 80 like that. So those are, I wouldn't say they're trends, but they're more common than you think, and they're disturbing. Yeah. It's not just I got into a fight, or I got trespassed, or I skipped school, or whatever. The juvenile system can deal with that. And we have a lot of really cool tools that deal with minor offenses. They're really neat and they work really well.
Yeah. There used to be a saying, well, I guess it's still there, but it used to be stronger than it is today. It takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
So we're saying that, what are, how is like community organizations like Cut Different? How can we be a part of the solution when it comes to you?
So I can say that you've already done that. When we met, I think we were talking earlier, maybe 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago, when you came to the office. I remember it because I remember everybody being in our big conference room, or actually it was probably had 30, 40 kids in there, ranging in age. And I think, and this goes back to something you and I had talked about one time before, exposure.
Yeah.
So if you are not exposed to anything other than what you're exposed to in your small world, you're never going to know any differently. And that goes for me too. When those kids came in and spoke, that you brought to the courthouse, and they met with the judge, they met with us, they probably met with the bailiff and all kinds of people. Yep. They got exposed to something that is a real opportunity for them to realize, I might want a career in law enforcement. I want a career at the courthouse. I want to be a judge. Yeah. If they weren't exposed to that, they wouldn't know about that. And I think that's great. Yeah. So I think that's how you can make a difference. And one of the things I was talking to one of my juvenile prosecutors about earlier was same question. It was like, what do you need? You being like the lawyers in this docket with these kids, what do they need? She's like, we need mentors.
Yeah.
It was right before I came over, because I asked, I was like, we don't have enough mentors to be good examples.
Yeah. And that's powerful.
Yeah.
Even when you talk about exposure, we just left today. We had the boys here. Our summer leadership academy is going now, and we do from 9 to 2. So we're just over here at the Ocala golf course here, and the boys were out there swinging and golfing. And one of the boys said, I just heard him from the background, said, I think this may be my new sport. But just, that's right. Exposure. Like you just don't know what you know, and that's the power of it, man.
I heard a saying, and it's kind of similar. Life is like a book, and if you never travel, you've never turned the page. And it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And for someone who hates traveling, and I really hate traveling, people make me go travel with them, and then I really enjoy it. And I'm exposed to things that I otherwise wouldn't have seen. So
that's funny. Hold on, why do you hate traveling?
I'm afraid to fly.
Oh, okay.
And I flew back, I think it was 2 days ago, and there was a really good reason why I'm afraid to fly.
It's a tough time now.
Because they had to tell everybody to sit down and buckle up, and I'm like, man, this is why I didn't want to come.
Yeah, that's part of it. Well, I like it. But so let's go over misconceptions and misunderstandings. So how do you stay grounded, man, when in the face of public opinion? So when I think about this, I think about a video, as I told you. I was obviously researching for this episode, and once I get on the internet, I see you in these heated circumstances. The one in particular, the one with Miss AJ Owens, and you were out front, you're facing the public. Like, I can only imagine what that feeling was like walking out to that. So how do you stay grounded in moments like that?
So for me, I can always fall back on my job is to follow the law and to not get into a situation where I make a decision based on emotions. If I do that, then I personalize things, and that's not fair to anybody, the victim or the defendant. So, and that was a unique situation for me, not a unique situation, but it was one of the first big, it was the biggest quickly evolving moment that I had to deal with. Mm-hmm. And I heard there was something going on in the front of the office, and then I started to hear more, and then I started getting phone calls. And I went up, because if there's an issue in the lobby, I go up all the time because rather than sending somebody else up there who either can't answer or doesn't have the decision-making authority, I'll just go deal. And we get some people that come in, all kinds of issues. But when I came up there, they said, you can't go out. And there were deputies starting to come in. And I was like, why not? Well, there's a ton of people. And I started to hear that. I didn't know how many people, but there were a lot of people in that area. And I just said, well, I can't sit back here. I mean, I'll go out and try to answer questions because they're owed that. If they don't want to listen, I can't change that. So how do I stay grounded? The law is a good fallback position because the reality is I can see long-term and I don't want to do anything. And I was able to explain to the family later on, the decisions I made are in the best interest of how this case will be in the future. From your perspective, it's hard to see that. And I understand it.
For sure. And I was thinking that because even in that moment, obviously, we all have our opinion on what should have been done. But you had to be in front of that. And now on the back end of it, looking back at that case, what are your takeaways? Like, what did you learn from that?
I learned for myself that I feel like I did the right thing. It's not my job to stretch something into what others think it could be when those other people aren't going to have to be there, standing there with the victims in court. I don't want to overpromise anything. And the family, be very careful. I think they had a lot of people in their ears telling them this should be this way and this should be this way and this should, but those people they had not talked to me and they had not talked to the people that worked up the case. So we knew best. And it's tough, but you just have to say, look, you have to trust me on this. And I know you don't know me and I know you've gone through a tragedy, but I'm asking you to trust me. And that's tough. I don't really trust anybody. So it's a tough thing. I mean, but what I learned is in the end, we got justice and we had a just result in the way I see it.
What is the role of, so obviously we're doing all this talking, but for the most people watching this, they may not even know what is the role of a state attorney. Like, what's your job?
So the easiest way to describe it is most people have seen Law and Order, and there's a district attorney somewhere in New York that manages the prosecutors in the office. In Florida, we have a state attorney. We have 20 of them. So each circuit has one state attorney. Across the state, from as small as the Keys, which has its own state attorney, like smallest, to Miami, which has one state attorney and probably 2.5 million people in it. Our job is to make sure that as the cases come in from law enforcement and from the citizens, that each case is evaluated and a decision is made as to whether or not we can prove the case and file charges. The tricky part is law enforcement has probable cause as their standard when they make an arrest. So, and that's because on the side of the road, you can't do, you don't have the opportunity to make a complete investigation about everything right there. You have to look at the facts. This is what it appears. This is what the evidence shows. I'm going to make a decision. And our job is to take that probable cause and decide whether or not it'll ever be proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the highest burden that you have in the criminal justice system. So from arrest to us filing charges, we have to have a good faith belief that we can win at trial and sustain that conviction on appeal.
There's a lot that goes into it, because everything you're saying, when I'm hearing it, all you see is the decision being made. Most people see the decision being made, and it's like, you're the bad guy. So obviously, from somebody looking outside, they could think, you can define success in your role by how many people go to jail. But I'm pretty sure that's not the case. So how do you define success in your role?
I look at a lot of metrics, and that is one of them, frankly. But I look at not just how many, but who. And I take into consideration the wishes of the victim, which by law we're required to do. But I give what the victims want in persons crimes, I give them great deference but not complete deference either. Because sometimes the perspective of, and I'll give you an example, like a victim of spousal abuse, domestic violence, could have gone on for years. That, by the way, can affect many generations. It's multi-generational. So a spouse might come in and say, don't prosecute him, it was an accident. But if you've had 3 cases in the last 3 years that spouse has come in and said the same thing, over that person's objection, I'm probably going to push forward. Those are tough because there are times when that person in custody or the person who's been arrested takes it out on the victim because they're cooperating with us. And sometimes we're forced to make a decision that there's really no good decision. Do I keep going forward and then he does something terrible to her? Do I not go forward and then the next time I get a phone call, it's going to be he's killed her? There are lots of situations where there's no right answer.
So you say you got it right with the situation with Miss AJ Owens. Can you tell me a situation where you question if you got it right?
Well, we do get our fair share of not guilties. I don't look at them as if we got it wrong. I kind of harken back to what I said earlier. If our evaluation of the evidence wasn't in line with what the jury decided that we needed, then, I will evaluate my decision and say, all right, well, that's going to impact in the future. Well, now I know these cases are tougher than I thought, right? We either need to do more or I'm not going to go down that path again. I charged 2 county commissioners in another county with perjury. It was my opinion, and I think the evidence supported it. It did support it, that they had lied to me about an ongoing investigation regarding some sunshine law violations. And one entered a negotiated pretrial intervention, 70 years old, never done anything wrong, goes into PTI and admits guilt to some extent and then testifies against the other one. And then we have a trial and the other one gets convicted. And I felt like, all right, people now know you can't come and lie to the state attorney after they've told you they're conducting an investigation. The appellate court reversed, and they said that there was insufficient evidence, even though the jury and the judge had found contrary to that. So they looked at the raw, dry record and decided that we weren't there. I mean, whether I like it or not, I got that wrong. Because the appellate court said so.
So for sure. Jesus Christ, going to faith a little bit. It believes everyone should have a second chance through faith. You deserve a second chance. Does Bill Gladson believe everyone deserves a second chance?
So if you were to look hard enough into, you had mentioned earlier about doing some research on me. I had a interview, I want to say it was in Lake County, about our diversion programs, and I'm quoted as saying, everybody in quotes deserves a second chance. Of course, that's not always true. I mean, some people do things that are so heinous that they don't deserve a second chance, but I absolutely do. And we try to divert for 2 reasons. First, it's the right thing to do. And second, you have to. We try to divert cases out of the traditional criminal track of go to trial, get prosecuted, go to prison, to get some help, get some job skills, and get out of the way so we can focus on the people who've done something more serious. So we give second chances. We also participate in an expungement clinic. So if you've got a criminal history that is eligible for expulsion, us in the clerk's office will work together to let people know, like, hey, you may be thinking about this in the background. It may not be a big deal to you, but we can help you get that off your record. You haven't done anything for 20 or 30 years or however long it's been, and let's clean that up. So I do think that. And I also will tell you, frankly, I did things that I shouldn't have done when I was young.
Tell us about it. What you
No. Dumb high school things, but things that would have gotten me in trouble.
No, that's so with knowing
more than my fair share.
And that's a key point. With knowing that you, even State Attorney Bill Gladson, you made mistakes. You've done
absolutely.
Does that play into, I guess, when you are making those decisions, man, do you think back on stuff like that?
100%, especially when it comes to, for example, hypothetically, possession of alcohol by a minor or something like that. Or, a few other things. I have to look at that and say, all right, that may or may not be something that, growing up in Miami in the 80s, perhaps I knew some people that did. So I do take that into consideration. But that's a far cry from where I think the problem lies, is where the juveniles who see that we talked about one time before, if you're a juvenile and you're in a bad situation or you're in bad circumstances and you don't have any hope, that's really the problem. And I think that's where the mentors come in. My hope growing up was I could get out of my household. I wanted to move. I wanted to get out of Miami and leave And I always joke with my mom, but I was like, you guys are the reason I left. I mean, good job, but I'm out. I'm not coming back. I needed to leave that place.
Yeah, not for sure. Hope is key. So as we're wrapping up, if there was a group full of young people that was watching this podcast, that didn't have hope, they didn't have nowhere to turn. They were out there, had one foot in, one foot out. What would you say to those group of you?
I would like young people to know that there are people like you that are interested in listening to what they need. Because I think we tend to talk to people and not listen to people, particularly young people. They can be very intuitive. They can be perceptive. They can see things that aren't clouded by our feelings or our prejudices or whatever they might be as a young kid. So I think we need to listen to them. And I would like them to know that we are willing to listen to you about what you need. Someone just needs to start that conversation. And unfortunately for me, where the job that I do, I'm at the end of the line. All of the hard work needs to be done before you get to me. So you don't ever get to me. And that's the tough thing, because, I'm accountable to the law. I'm accountable to the victims. And sometimes I have to look at situations that are terrible and say, I understand your point, but the victim doesn't care about your childhood. You committed an armed robbery, and now they can't go outside, and they're scared or whatever it might be.
For sure. What's the end goal for Bill Gladson?
Man, I just want to survive. Every day. So the great thing about this job is you never know what's going to happen next, and it does keep me on my toes. My dad worked literally until the day he died. Wow. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I have, growing up in a big city, I didn't know what to expect moving to a smaller town, but I've enjoyed becoming a real part of this community, and I'm glad and proud that my kids were born and raised here and that we've made a life. I'm on the United Way board. I was on the college board. I was on the board at Cornerstone. Those are things that my parents would have never done, probably because they wouldn't have thought about it, but even if they wanted to, they wouldn't have had the time. So I do like being involved in the community. And I think it's easy to talk about problems. It's a lot harder to solve them or to get into the real,
get in the mix.
Yeah. And that's, there's a saying, and I can't recite the whole thing, but it's part of a speech that Teddy Roosevelt gave in Europe. He was addressing thousands of people and world leaders, and he was talking about, the people that are, it's called the man in the arena, if you've ever heard. The people that are in the arena who fight the good fight and have the victories, but also have the defeats. They're the ones who are really, really living life. Yeah. And if you don't ever take those chances, and I wouldn't be a person that would take those chances, you kind of have to push me into that. And then I learned from it. So
this is, again, another selfish question that just came to mind. You can answer this quickly. When you think about leadership, I'm big on leadership. I was an athlete, played collegiate sports. So I'm always looking to learn from other leaders. I was thinking about, what are your guiding principles, I guess, that you may guide your team? When you're going into your team meetings or whatever you guys call them, leadership meetings, what are some of the foundation of the principles that you're pushing to your team?
So I tell them that you always have to do the right thing, no matter what you perceive the consequences might be, no matter who's going to be mad at you. And I let them know right up front, as long as you make a decision that you have thought about and tried to reason and gathered as much information about, you make a decision and it turns out it's the wrong decision. Let's say you got it wrong, but you tried. I will back you up, and I will always have their back, because I want them to know that in the beginning, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to screw stuff up. They're going to get things wrong. But as long as they try, it's when you don't try and you just don't take things seriously that we're going to have a problem in my office. I also would like to have more people with a sense of urgency. I don't know if in life you've noticed that, but I'm envious of the people that are just kind of floating around and everything's fine, and then the rest of us are all, biting our fingernails. So I just,
I get it. So one thing I appreciate you for coming on. One thing, as we talked about in the beginning, man, one thing I hope that everyone takes from this episode, I wanted to humanize you. One of the privileges I get in this position that I am, I get to meet leaders like yourself. I get to go around and a lot of different people that I would never have met. I always say there's two sides of Ocala. I was born and raised in West Ocala. All right. So there's a different view that I had of this city when I was growing up. I left Ocala and went to Philadelphia because I wanted to get as furthest away from here because I felt like the city did nothing but take from me. Coming back after being exposed, going to college, going to grad school, living in Philly, living in Chicago, I came back home with a different point of view, a different perspective, and that allowed me to see the city different. And I was able to come back and start navigating different waters, the other side of Ocala. I remember interactions with people that were close to me. I got back, I was meeting people like Mary Gwen. I would hear stuff, you meet with that white man? You know, you meet with stuff like that? Like these are real conversations that are happening because there's a group of people, and this is just not a black and white thing. This is just a mindset thing or just a viewpoint thing, I guess. Some people just can't see clearly in a sense, if you get what I'm trying to say. And one thing I get to do as talking with people like yourself, I get to see the real Bill Gladson. That's why when we sat down, I was like, man, I have to get you on the podcast because people need to see who you are.
Well, I appreciate that. And, you know, I'll quickly tell you kind of another point that I think drives home what you just said. I grew up Catholic in a large Catholic family. My wife's Jewish and my children are Jewish, and they were born and raised in a town where you would think that might be an issue, and it wasn't. They were accepted. But I did hear things from time to time that I would have not perhaps flinched at if I hadn't been in this family that I'm in. I wouldn't have maybe thought twice about. So being exposed to that was an important factor. But you know where he did experience some anti-Semitism? In Chicago, where he lives now. So it's interesting, you know, that every community's got different groups of people and different perspectives and see things differently. But Ocala is a very welcoming and incredibly generous community, I think, all around. And I think it's something we should all be proud of.
And like you said, it's anywhere you go, you can fight. If you're looking for bad, you're going to find bad. You look for good, you're going to find good. And you're going to be able to find it. But I hope this conversation allows people to know there may be some things, or there's some things, even with, if we go back to that I didn't agree with, but that doesn't mean you're a bad person. I mean, that was your job and you did what you thought you had to do. That doesn't mean I have to hate you for what you thought you had to do. So, so again, man, great sit down, Bill Gladson, state attorney. So stop what you're doing right now. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. Man, these things are going. If you don't know, you should be. I invited you as well. So you guys, Brittany, I need you to put this on the calendar. July 25th, our summer gala. I hope everybody will be there. Obviously, the flyer is probably popping up on the screen right now. Make sure everybody's there July 25th over at Church of Hope. We'll be having our summer gala, man. Our boys are working hard right now this summer, and they'll be able to display all the things they've been learning. So it's going to be a big night for us. I think that's it, man. Just keep on keeping on. We always like to wrap up our podcast with the guests. Again, if you look in your camera, I usually always think about something. I already told you to say something to the youth. Just say something. I don't know what you got, whatever, to the community, to the people you serve.
Listen, I'll say it again. We have a great community. We have great community leaders. Thank you for the invitation to be here. The theme, I think, has probably been exposure.
Yeah, for sure.
And the more we expose everybody to who we are and what we stand for and what we do, the better our community is.
For sure. We'll see you next week.